Hi, everyone. It's Terry Bruce, and this is another 10-minute nonprofit evaluation tips. Now, this month, we're talking about outputs versus outcomes versus impact. And within the evaluation ecosystem model, this puts us in the evaluation schema domain where we're talking about what are we measuring and how are we going to measure it. Now, we've talked about outputs versus outcomes in the weekly video logs. We talked about outputs versus objectives in the written blog. I want to cap off this month by putting it all together and looking at what objectives versus output versus outcome versus impact would look like when we were designing a strategic plan or a logic model or other planning or evaluation and strategic planning documents. So for the example that we have here, our organization's mission or part of its mission is to decrease the local unemployment rate. We live or work in a community that has very high unemployment. And one of our strategies for doing that is to increase educational attainment. We have found that there's a very high high school dropout rate and low rate of educational attainment. And this is a barrier preventing people from getting jobs, which is contributing to the low unemployment rate. So we feel like if we can help people get more education, then we will be able to affect the unemployment rate. And we're going to do that through a number of activities or breakdown of our strategies. We're going to decrease the high school dropout rate. So we're going to get more kids to finish high school. We're going to help more people get into apprenticeships, because that's going to be some on-the-job training, but it's education as well, so kind of skills training. We're going to increase the GED attainment rates for people who already dropped out of school. So we're not going to help just the high school kids, but we're going to help adults get more education. We're going to try to increase attainment of post-secondary certifications, so skills like one-year certificate programs, because again, this is credentialing and education that help people get jobs, and increase participation in college degree programs as well. So we've got a multi-pronged approach to increasing education. We're attacking everybody at all the grade levels. We've got the high school kids, we've got the college kids, and we've got the adults all the way up from age 18 to death, that we are going to be helping get some level of increased education, which will hopefully help them get jobs or increase their earnings. Now, for each of these strategies that we have here, we have an objective, which is that breakdown, that micro step towards achieving the goal. So right here, we want to decrease the high school dropout rate, and we're going to provide academic mentoring to 100 high school students at risk of dropping out of high school per year. So that's our objective. Right here, for increasing apprenticeship, we're going to provide apprenticeship placement services to 250 adults aged 18 plus each year. We're going to provide GED study partners to 40 people per year, provide financial assistance or scholarships to 75 adults seeking job/career-related certifications per year, and provide college admissions coaching to 25 high school juniors per year. We have a very ambitious program here. We've set some hard targets and metrics. These are objectives because it's worded as an aspiration. We're going to provide this. That makes it not the output or the outcome, because it's the aspiration. So this is the step we're going to take to achieve these goals. So what would the output be for this? Well, I think for each of these types of things, this is where organizations start to overthink it. The output is just the measure of volume. You've already said what your volume is going to be. The objective really is just, it's how many people got the academic mentoring. You're aiming for 100. Did you achieve 100? That's all it is. It's just how many people got the service. Guess what the output for each of these is? How many people got the service? If you're kind of going more complex than that, you don't necessarily have to. We're going to talk about that in 1 second, but start simple. If you're new to evaluation, or you find that your organization's been struggling with the objectives versus outputs versus outcomes, keep it simple. The output is the volume, and the volume has already been expressed as an aspiration. So it basically is, did you achieve your aspiration is the research question. So number of people who received assistance, number of people who received assistance, number of high school juniors who received coaching. That's the number of people who received the assistance. The outcomes are going to be the result of those services. So if we're providing academic mentoring to 100 high school students, The reason we're doing that is to decrease the high school dropout rate. So the outcome is the number of at-risk students who received mentoring and didn't drop out. It's that simple. It is that simple. If you're trying to increase apprenticeship participation and you're providing placement to people in apprenticeships, it's the number of people who completed apprenticeships, because that's a change in behavior. And all of these are also hopefully a change in skills, right? And knowledge. We're trying to increase educational attainment. So they have increased attainment, which is a change in behavior and or knowledge. Like the juniors who are getting college mentoring, it might be about how to apply for college. So that's a change in knowledge, as well as the behavior of they actually go through and apply for college. So all of these, it's, number of people who obtain their GED. So again, this is a skills and knowledge and change in behavior. People who actually pursue GED who might not otherwise if they didn't get these services. So the outputs and outcomes should always flow from your goals and objectives. If you formulated your goals and objectives correctly in your strategic plan or your action plan or your logic model, the outputs and outcomes should write themselves. They should be very straightforward. And then the impact is, again, what is our organization's vision, which is a decreased unemployment rate. So guess what our impact is? Overall educational attainment in the community went up and the unemployment rate went down. That's impact is the cumulative. So a lot of times when organizations are really struggling to formulate what are the outcomes, what are the impact, they're overthinking it. They're overthinking it. It should flow and start with, if you've articulated a really good, clear goal and the steps for achieving that goal, the outputs and outcomes should write themselves. Now, you might want to get a little fancier. Now, once you get some more sophistication and kind of wrangle and get the basic outputs and outcomes, then you can start layering and become more sophisticated. So here's the same sort of logic model, but now we've gone a little more complex. The objectives, the goal, strategy, and objectives have not changed, but we've gone a little deeper with our outputs and our outcomes. So for this one, the objective to decrease the high school dropout rate, we're providing academic mentoring to at-risk kids. Originally, we had number of high school students who receive academic mentoring as our output. We could also look at the average number of hours of services provided to each student, because now this is getting a little more sophisticated, and this is also sort of a program evaluation metric, but is there a linkage between the number of hours of services provided and the intended outcome? So if we found that 100 people received services, but they still dropped out of school, we might want to look at and say, well, why is that? How is that? And it could be they didn't get enough hours of academic mentoring. They needed more support, or maybe academic mentoring wasn't the problem. Maybe they needed like support mentoring, like more like coaching and mental health counseling and support versus academics, whatever it is. But we can start looking at the actual services we're providing. And for increased participation in apprenticeship, number who received assistance, but number who were placed in apprenticeship and number who completed apprenticeship. Because again, just because they were placed in apprenticeship doesn't mean that they learned anything, gained any skills, gained any knowledge that will help them get a job. So we can look at, they received assistance, maybe we did an intake, but then maybe we deemed that they weren't appropriate to place in an apprenticeship. So we can start looking at, well, did they actually get placed, and did they actually complete? And if they didn't complete, maybe we need to provide mentoring, coaching support to help them stay in place in their apprenticeship and figure out what went wrong. These types of things are program evaluation. They're still not outcome evaluation, but there is now a depth to the outputs we're looking at that help us do program evaluation, determine if our program was effective at achieving its outcomes, its intended outcomes, and if not, why not? It may also help us design different outcomes. We may realize that our program as designed is never going to have the intended outcome. So for increased GED attainment, okay, they received study partners. How many of them obtained their GED? That's an output, or it could be an outcome. And you're like, wait a minute, Terry. Well, if we say the number who obtained their GED and the goal is unemployment, then the outcome then becomes who got a job for which an GED was required, and or they increased their earnings, right? So if we change the output and we take this number who obtained GED is no longer the output, but it's the outcome, it's in fact now an output, then we'd need a different outcome. It can't be the output and the outcome. We served 100 people, 100 people were served. Therefore, the program was effective. So if it's to increase the number of people who get their GED, then we're assuming getting your GED is going to lead to getting a better job or earning more money, which will then affect the unemployment rate. So you see how we kind of are moving the needle, right, in terms of sophistication. It's okay to say the output is number who received assistance, and then the outcome is number who got a GED. Or you can then go deeper and say, well, it's actually the output is number of people who got their GED, and did the GED lead to increased earnings, right? So that's kind of a higher, like, that's a top tier creme de la creme output outcome formulation. It's okay to just do number received assistance and number got their GED. But when you start getting more sophisticated and you start going, I don't like these outputs and outcomes, they're not as sophisticated as I want. There is a way to go deeper, but again, you see that it all flows together, and it's sort of, I don't want to say it's not rocket science. It is a science and it is difficult. But oftentimes, if you're really, really struggling as an organization and you've been in strategic planning meetings that are going around and around and around in circles and trying to come up with the perfect outputs and outcomes, you're probably overthinking it. You can always go deeper later, but if you're trying to get really deep right off the bat, you're probably overthinking it, and you just need to step back a little and go a little simpler. Increased obtainment and post-secondary certifications. Number of people who received assistance is a perfectly fine output, but you can also look at number of people who obtained certification. So it's not just that they got assistance, but did they get a certification? Well, if we're going to use this as our output instead of the outcome, then the outcome has to be reformulated to something more complex, which would be something like number of people who increased their employment or earnings. And now you're going, Terry, but if we're saying that they increased their earnings and employment, isn't that the intended impact? How is that an outcome? We're going to talk about this when we get in another month about outcomes versus impact. But impact is the cumulative effect in the community. That's unemployment rate. This is talking about individuals who increase their employment or earnings. Individuals, it's an outcome. When we get to the cumulative overall impact in the community, that's impact. So these, measuring employment and earnings can be done at the outcome level and the impact level, but you're looking at different data and you're looking at a different population, sort of a size of the community. One is looking at individuals and one is looking at the cumulative effect. So hopefully now you're starting to see how these flow together. It can be very simplistic, and you can start with that very simple logic model or strategic plan where your outputs are just a regurgitation of your objective framed as a result instead of an intention or aspiration. And the outcome is basically the achievement of the output or the change that results for the people that are being measured in the output. Or you can get more sophisticated where that outcome at the tier 1 suddenly becomes your output, and then you have a tier 2 outcome that's a little more sophisticated and a little more deep, that's showing the actual results that are happening. Now we're going to get much more deeply into this over the next few months. This is not the end all be all, but I want you to take this, print it out if you want to, or study it. And I want you to do the same kind of thing for your programs and services. If you feel like your logic model or your strategic plan does not quite meet the brief, as the saying goes, and it's not quite up to snuff, then I want you to do this. Figure out what your organization's goal or a program's goal is, what the strategy is for achieving that goal. Put in your strategies or objectives and formulate that as an aspiration or a step you're going to take, and then write some very simple outputs versus outcomes. And again, this needs to be a change in knowledge, skills, values, attitudes, or beliefs versus this is volume of services delivered. And it should become very clear very easily if you just lay it out very simply and just take it one program or chunk at a time. As you gain sophistication, then you can start trying to look at the roll-up of your whole organization. All right, as always, if you have any questions or feedback or thoughts, Join the conversation over on the Substack. In the meantime, like, subscribe, and share the Substack. And you can find all of that at terrybruce.substack.com. And I'll see you all next month.